Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the conceptual battle that has erupted in the Dungeons and Dragons commentator community, that has erupted between Dungeons and Dragons commentators over theater of the mind or miniatures and terrain. So this has been bubbling for about a month, and literally probably 50 to 100 different channels have weighed in on this, and there's been sparks back and forth on this erupted battle, this erupted conceptual battle scene of theater of the mind or miniatures and terrain. So today I want to talk about a couple things. One, incoming. There is an incoming significant number of videos that I am going to do on this theater of mind versus miniatures and terrain. And I'm going to give you the definitive Scott Garibay, this is right, this is the wrong way to do this in Dungeons and Dragons, okay, in my humble opinion, right? So everybody said their piece, right? And a lot of times if I'm not talking about something and the whole community is talking about it, I'm still kind of like putting my thoughts together, right? And so one of the things when I started taking my notes on this, I was like, okay, let's do this video. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like 6 videos, right? Like, so incoming, there's a series coming, right? So I did an entire series on disciplines that have to be mastered as a dungeon master. I've done series on these are the best Dungeons and Dragons commentators with subs over 100,000, with subs under 100,000, right? Different series. This has to be addressed as a series. So this is a huge topic, okay? So just want to give you fair warning, incoming. You got a whole bunch of videos coming in on the right and the wrong way to do theater of the mind and or miniatures versus miniatures and terrain, okay? Second, let's talk about why is this being talked about right now. A lot of commentators really, one commentator I listened to was like, why are we talking about this again? What's happening? Didn't we already discuss this and this was done? So why are we talking about this? Well, just so you're aware, in the Dungeon Masters and Dungeon, by the way, Theater of the Mind versus miniatures is not a Dungeon Master question. It is really a dungeon master and a dungeon player, right? So Dungeons & Dragons players can decide if miniatures show up. And the reason why is players can bring miniatures to the game, and they can literally just, and no dungeon master can really stop. So believe it or not, a player can turn your theater of the mind into a miniatures and terrain game on their own, right? And so all they need to do is bring their miniature and just place it in front of them, right? And there are different things that they can do as well. Like, for instance, you might say, I'm running Theater of the Mind, and your player can turn it into a miniatures and terrain game simply by placing their miniature in front of them. And one, that they're saying to the entire team, I'm not going to tell you what my player character looks like. You're going to see it. Conversation's finished, right? There's their weapons. There's their race and classes depicted by their clothing, by their weapon choices. And literally, you over here said 100 words about your character, but I placed this miniature down and I've painted and I've said 1,000 words with this picture, right? And also, you're like, well, we do theater of the mind, right? Well, one of your players brings a nice miniature to the table, puts it down that actually represents their character, and then when they go prone, they literally just turn it down. You are now a miniatures and terrain campaign, even though you as the dungeon master said you were running theater of the mind, right? And this is exactly the type of content I want to talk about, right? Because this is a very, very deep subject, right? And I'm glad that we're having this again. Another reason why we're having this conversation again, and why this has absolutely exploded onto the scene for Dungeons and Dragons commentators again recently, is there have been massive changes there are huge changes happening constantly in Dungeons and Dragons, right? And just to be clear, when you as a dungeon master, let's talk to dungeon masters for a minute. You deal with people, processes, and tools. You deal with the people at your table, the people beyond your table, okay? You deal with now some of you. I don't think there's many people here who don't understand that Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to impact people beyond your table. I don't think there's many of them left watching my channel here, but there are dungeon masters out there like, oh, people beyond my table will be affected by my game. Yes, right. So people beyond your table, right? Then there are processes. What are the processes you use to play Dungeons and Dragons? And this is a whole host of things. Like, for instance, do you allow snacks at the table? When somebody brings a snack, are they supposed to bring snacks for others? And like 15 other things that are just process, right? And then tools. What tools do you use to play Dungeons and Dragons? And this is a tool question, but it's also a people question, and it's also a process question, right? So this touches all three of those, right? And one of the things is the people who are playing our Dungeons and Dragons are changing. We're getting people who didn't play before coming in, right? The people themselves are changing. People do not remain static, right? The processes are changing, and guess what? Miniatures are massively changing right now. So we keep having this question because the miniature industry is arguably far more profitable. I just realized this year. I think miniatures may be producing more money for Dungeons and Dragons than the books. That's incredible, right? Like, WizKids has their official line, right? But there are also people clearly who are buying Pathfinder miniatures to play in Dungeons and Dragons, who are buying Reaper Bones miniatures to play in Dungeons and Dragons. I even know people who use Citadel Warhammer miniatures in Dungeons and Dragons, right? So, and get this, one of the biggest, no pun intended, changes is these mega miniatures, right? Like, I'm not kidding, we have so many $100 plus miniatures, and now $300 plus miniatures. That's what the Tales of the Yawning Portal miniature set is. It's $325. But we have many $100 plus miniatures, a single miniature costing $100 or more. And there are a growing number of people looking at Dwarven Forge and dedicating entire rooms to the miniatures for their games. So this is why this is so. I recently listened to a commentator who's not a great comment. I don't know. I do listen to his content a lot, and he was blah. Why are we talking about this? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, we're talking about this because the world changes, right? Like, it's very significant. So all that's in the mix. I'm very excited about this. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I usually all my videos are standalone, but these are all going to be a connected series, and I just wanted to give you a heads up before I started it. So we're going to talk in depth about Theater of the Mind, and I'm going to give you hard numbers, and I'm going to to actually say this is right, this is wrong, this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, in my humble opinion. Thank you. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.